This is the final E101 presentation for Team Lima, Haley Edmonds, Hannah Sherrill, and Caitlin Collier, and we did the fabric bucket. So our design process was ask, imagine, plan, create, and improve, which is a basic engineering design process. So for ask, we asked what are the problems, which was to design a bucket made of fabric that can hold 1 gallon of water for 60 seconds. The bucket must be carried a long distance and it must hang from a hook. What are the constraints? We could only spend $40. The bucket had to be foldable, compressible when empty, and it could be no longer than 24 inches when full of water, and it had to noticeably contain at least 50% fibrous materials. The next step in the process was to imagine, which is brainstorm ideas and choose the best idea. Our first idea was a cylindrical bucket with handles at the top, but this proved to be too difficult because we did not know how to use a sewing machine, and it would require us to sew the handles on and maybe even sew the bottom of it. So then we moved on to this next idea, which we found through our research, and it was to basically just make a giant circle and then cut holes around the circle so that we could bunch the entire circle together. And then once we had the fabric bunched together, we could weave a handle through it, and then we wouldn't have to sew anything, and it would just be a lot easier. The next step is plan. Draw a diagram and gather materials that are needed. So we kept our diagram of the circle, and then we gathered the materials that we were going to need, which was canvas, fabric, wool fabric, candle wax, and beeswax. We're going to do a layer of canvas, then a layer of beeswax, layer of wool, layer of candle wax, because our research found that layering was a good technique. The next step in the design process was to follow the plan and test it out. So we followed the plan and we made the circle and then we bunched it all together, and when we tested it out we found that it did begin to leak after about half a gallon of water was poured in about 30 seconds. The next step in the design process is improve. Discuss what can work better and then repeat the steps. So with our first prototype we found that it started leaking where there wasn't enough wax to prevent it from leaking. So we need to add more layers of wax, and then we wanted to add a layer of cotton on the inside just so that our water would not be contaminated, and then we could qualify for an extra credit point at design day. So then we repeated the steps and we came up with our final product, which we showed on design. Performance at design day. We did not do as well as we would have liked to on design day. Our bucket did not fit in the container, so we were not able to compete for first place or second place. We were just only graded. But our bucket began to leak after about 90% of the gallon of water had been poured in, and so we only lasted for about 45 seconds before it started leaking.
Looking at how we did our project, I think there are a few things we would do differently if we had to do it again. First off, if we did it again, it would be beneficial for us to test more materials as well as attempt to absorb some different coatings into the fabric to see how they worked. Secondly, I think we should have made the size of our bucket smaller. It ultimately didn't fit inside the small box that was required, and that was a big issue. Also, due to the large size, we needed more materials to coat the inside of the bucket. Thus, if we had this project again, we would make a smaller bucket that used less material. Lastly, I think the biggest thing we would do differently is to dedicate more time to the project. We ultimately pushed the project off until it was necessary to complete. As a result, we had less time to troubleshoot any issues that arose, which most likely had a negative effect on our project.
My advice to next year's freshman class would be to pick a project you're interested in and not procrastinate.